Please be seated. Life is filled with great mysteries. Life itself might be the greatest one. Where it begins and where it ends are always just out of reach for us. We brush up against the edges of our understanding, but the big questions keep slipping through our fingers. Human beings, being curious creatures that we are, have always tried to stretch our minds around those great mysteries. We invent little words and puzzles that force us to look differently at what we think we know. There are those multivariant Gestalt images that alternate between two distinct understandings depending on one's point of view. Is it a duck or a rabbit? Is that an old woman or a young bride? We create involved stories meant to problematize the simple understandings, like that ethical problem called the trolley problem, with its impossible choice between saving 5 relative strangers or the life of someone you love by diverting the trolley one direction or the other. And through it, we're pulled into the deep end of moral responsibility. There's the ship of Theseus, wondering if something is still itself when every constituent part has been changed, nudging us to think differently about identity and continuity. And then there's Schrödinger's cat, that strange little box where the cat is somehow both alive and dead until someone pulls back the lid to look inside. It's a reminder that sometimes the world isn't as solid or as predictable as we imagine. Thought experiments like this don't give us answers so much as they loosen our grip. They help us unclench our certitude so we can hold mystery a little more lightly. And perhaps that's actually what today's gospel is attempting to do. The text opens with a Jewish sect called the Sadducees. They were a powerful, aristocratic Jewish group during the time of Jesus. And they were composed mainly of high priests and nobles and wealthy merchants who controlled the temple in Jerusalem. And their core beliefs were that only the written Torah was authoritative, and they rejected the oral traditions of the Pharisees, as well as the resurrection of the dead, life after death, and the existence of angels. They were the enlightened rationalists of the day, like good Episcopalians in today's world, I suppose. And the Sadducees, they came to see Jesus with their own thought experiment about 7 brothers and 1 unfortunate woman, and a big question about marriage and the resurrection. However, unlike the earlier thought experiences that I shared, the Sadducees were not really curious at all. No, their question was a tight-fisted one. The Sadducees posed this question to force Jesus to expose how ludicrous the idea of the resurrection is. The Sadducees, if you remember from Sunday school, are sad, you see, because they don't believe in the resurrection. I just wanted to share that, so next time you hear it, you'll remember, sad, you see, no resurrection. Okay. But their logic is built on the assumption that the life to come must look exactly like the life we know here and now, with all the same rules, roles, and obligations. They're not asking to understand. They're asking to trap. And they're grasping, trying to control the narrative. Jesus answers by opening his hands. In the resurrection, he says, things aren't held the way you imagine. Life isn't clutched or categorized. People aren't possessions. Nothing is owned and nothing is owed. There is no taking and giving. There is no economy. Resurrection life is not a continuation of our grasping, but a transformation of it. Jesus first highlights the gap between understanding and imagination when he talks about those who belong to this age and those who are considered worthy of a place in the age and the resurrection of the dead. Marriage makes sense in this age, he says, but not in the next. He isn't dismissing marriage. He's exposing the limits of our categories. He's reminding us that we're trying to describe a world we've never seen, let alone experienced. It's like trying to explain color to someone who has only ever known black and white. Now, I know some of you are not old enough, but I think many of you are to remember when you had the black and white television and the neighbors got the color version, and you had to go over and see, because they couldn't explain it to you, right? That's what we're talking about. Jesus is talking in a different sort of way. He goes further. Those who are children of the resurrection cannot die anymore. And that's not a small detail. That's the whole landscape. It's like telling someone from our world about a place where gravity doesn't work, a place where no one ever runs out of money, or where illness doesn't even exist. You could almost hear the gears grinding in the disciples' imaginations as they try and get a hint at what Jesus is saying. You see, they've been thinking in terms of continuity, but Jesus is talking about transformation. Can we even imagine what life is like without the threat of death? Don't we sometimes define life as the opposite of death? We create a binary. The truth is, the threat of death drives so much of how we live. Not just literal death, but the little reminders of it. Putting small children to bed at night, for instance, or suffering, or scarcity, fear, comparison, the feeling that we don't have enough or that we are not enough. And most of the frantic urgency of our lives come from trying to outrun these shadows of death. So when Jesus draws a sharp line between this age and that age, he isn't just describing the afterlife. He's expanding our imagination. He's calling us to desire the life of the resurrection here and now, to want something more than the limited script the world hands us, to live as a people who are not ruled by fear. And if this is true, if through Jesus we really are children of the resurrection, then we've been given an immense freedom that changes everything. The image is no longer simply a duck or a rabbit. It's this whole new thing, a creature we've never imagined. It reshapes how we spend our time, how we use our money, how we invest our energy. And it loosens that anxious grip on our schedules and our futures and our need to manage every outcome. When fear loosens, space opens, imagination opens, compassion opens. Finally, hope opens. In the text, Jesus turns to Moses to make his point, and I think Moses offers us a model for how to open ourselves to the resurrection life. Moses shows us what it actually looks to see, to have our eyes opened to the wonder of the world instead of living inside the small rooms of fear and habit. The poet David Whyte captures this shift with such tenderness in his poem, The Opening of Eyes. He describes a moment when the world suddenly reveals itself, when soul wakes up to the deeper truth. That day I saw beneath dark clouds the passing light over the water, and I heard the voice of the world speak out. And I knew then, as I had before, life is no passing memory of what has been, nor the remaining pages in a great book waiting to be read. It is the opening of eyes long closed. It is the vision of far-off things, seen for the silence they hold. In the heart, after many years of secret conversing, speaking out loud in the clear air. It is Moses in the desert, fallen to his knees before the lit bush. It is the man throwing away his shoes as if to enter heaven and finding himself astonished, opened at last, fallen in love with solid ground. White tells a story about reciting this poem in Manhattan. And during the break, after he'd finished speaking, a Hasidic student approached him and said, "Do you know what the original verb, the Hebrew verb in the Bible is when God says, 'Take off your shoes'?" David admitted he wasn't a Bible scholar and didn't know. And the student said, "It means to shed your shoes." The same verb used for animals shedding its skin. Now that's an image, isn't it? God doesn't say, "Remove your shoes," politely. God says, "Shed them." Let go of that layer that has grown hard. Let go of what no longer fits or serves you. Let go of what keeps you from feeling the ground beneath you. And yes, shedding is no doubt awkward. You might not look great in the middle of it. And there's that vulnerable in-between stage when you're half peeled off and completely itchy and uncomfortable. But it's part of something new. It's the resurrection already here and now. That's what resurrection life is all about. Opening up to the new. Welcoming the uncomfortable not as a plague, but as the beginning of life. Maybe the resurrection life is not so much about life after death after all, but finding real life here and now, perhaps for the first time. Not floating off into the clouds, but shedding what keeps us closed and tense. Slipping out of old fears, old assumptions, old defenses, and old ways of seeing. Maybe resurrection is letting the rawness of the world touch us again, being broken open by it, and then letting ourselves be astonished, letting the solid ground under our feet feel holy again. Have you not seen the lit world all around you? These burning bushes didn't just happen once in Moses' time. Every fall, the whole world is illumined, brightly shining, calling out for us to realize holy ground is here. New life is possible. The whole world is a burning bush, beguiling and brilliant. Take a look. This morning, I want to ask you a couple questions. What do you have to shed to truly live? What story are you telling yourself about your life that you maybe have already outgrown? If death and scarcity were not the backdrop of every decision you make, what would your life feel like? Where would you find joy? How would you walk through the world if you actually trusted that your life is held by God, who is the God of the living? And God's very body is the holy ground on which we walk. Yes, life is a mystery that's calling to us. And it leaves us with questions that won't quite resolve, and possibilities that stretch far beyond our imagination. But maybe that's the point. That's the invitation. Not to solve the mystery, but to live open into it, to shed the hardened layers, to stand barefoot on holy ground, to trust the resurrection is not only ahead of us, but already moving in us here and now. So when you go from this place, may you feel in God inviting you to loosen your grip, to open your eyes, and to step into the spacious freedom as a child of the resurrection. May the God who calls you into new life bless you with the courage to shed all those things that no longer fit, give you wonder to see the holy that burns before you, and pour hope into your hearts so that you may rise stronger than the fear that constrains and constricts you. And then you too can be like Moses, standing on holy ground, seeing the divine wonder of everything present. And then your face too will shine, and the whole world will catch a glimmer of what's possible. Amen.